Hey, welcome to Wet, Wild, and Warpy. Today we are with Stephen Christopher talking about Necrons and the Necron Codex review. So,
Hello.
don't forget to hit like and subscribe before we get started. Before we even get started, just hit it. Just hit it. All right. So, moving on. So yeah, we got Stephen Christopher here below me, who is our Necron expert. So tell us a little bit about how long you've been playing, what armies you play.
So I've been playing since about 12 years old, roughly 12 or 13. And I've kind of jumped around based on how much I could afford. It was mainly Space Marines because, you know, eh, almost everybody's selling Space Marines for
Yeah.
like nothing. Um, was that?
I said yeah.
Yeah. So like my first army was actually Raven Guard, but I always looked at the Necron dudes and I always envied them. So, you know, took a little break, but I started up again in 8th edition and I was set and I was like, well, I have disposable income now. I might as well get Necrons.
Necron.
And I haven't looked back since. Dabbled in like a little bit of Raven Guard, a little bit of Tau, but Necrons is where it's at, man. They're the
Necron's the
best.
bread and butter. It pays the bills.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So, what drew you to Necrons other than just being lazy robot boys?
Well, I've always kind of liked the aesthetic of, in fantasy, I always like the kind of undead stuff. And when you mix that with the kind of technomancy, right, where you bring things back to life via these crazy arcane but futuristic technologies,
Yep.
like it really, really like gives you that cool aesthetic. And I actually just wanted to show you like a page from the Necron Codex real quick.
All
I
right.
was preparing for this, and this is one of the reasons to play Necrons. Look at how gorgeous each and every one of these things is, right?
Yeah. So the ninth edition release of the Necrons came out with all sorts of updated, beautiful models. And I was so excited when Drukhari was dropping, and I was like, we're gonna get a whole bunch of beautiful models. And now we're not gonna talk about that.
I didn't even know what you were talking about. But yeah, look at
Yeah.
that. Look at that new updated
Yeah.
monolith. Look at the Catan shard.
Look at the
You know?
lightning coming off of the models and the untapped energy of these models. They're a lot of fun. A lot of fun to just look at, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. And
Um,
look at that guy. I've heard he's pretty important.
Pretty important. I don't know. He doesn't talk a lot though.
No, no. I've heard he's pretty quiet about
Pretty
things.
quiet.
You know,
Pretty quiet. He likes
keep
to
the
keep it
secret.
hush hush, right? All right. So let's start digging in. Let's really start digging into what makes the Necron army, right? So every army kind of has a group of overarching rules that really just kind of expands the entirety of the army, minus maybe one or two models. So what is the Necron kind of overarching rules? What does all the Necrons get?
So whether you're a little grunt guy or whether you're a big, powerful behemoth, you get healing, right? You get to repair and reanimate yourself. If you're just a small guy, like a little Necron warrior, you can get back up,
Come
right?
back from the
If
dead.
you're one of come back from the dead. If you're, one of the big machines, like you slowly heal over time, like the scarabs are healing you. You can actually see it on the few of the models for the Tesseract Vault. Like they actually have little scarabs on them that are constantly healing them. So that's what you're really going for is outlasting your opponent. Yeah, they'll kill you, but you'll be back.
And they're very good at that. And one of the rules that really help them get that outlasting ability is that reanimation protocols. So I guess
That's
it's a,
right.
it's a combination of reanimation protocols and then living metal, right? So the rule I think you were just kind of talking about was living metal, where kind of everything heals just at the start of your turn.
Right, and that's everything. So if you're a multi-wound model, like Destroyers or like Scarabs, you heal a wound for free. Characters heal a wound for free every single turn. And I think people underestimate how powerful of an ability that is,
Well,
right? Because, yeah.
it really requires that dedication of firepower, right? You can't
Hmm.
you can't underkill a Necron because then the Necron is still there and it's back.
Yeah, and even if you're, I've had this happen in many games. People count on killing characters sometimes, and one of the things that they can do for a CP is, well, on a 4-up, I just get back up with D3 wounds. So even if you think you killed that character, you got to make sure he's
Right.
dead, or he's just going to be there.
Which is really annoying. Does that happen at the end of the phase or?
End of the phase.
Okay.
Yeah, so you do all your attacks, like let's say it's the melee phase, right? The fight phase, and you've done all your attacks, you've killed my Cryptek, and you're like, yeah, I got those 3 points or whatever, right? Nah, on a 5-up or a 4-up, he just comes back, and that happens quite often.
All right, so moving on from there, we move into where. So we've talked about how all the Necrons are kind of common, right? So that's Reanimation Protocols. We should talk about that before we move on. Reanimation Protocols are this beautiful, beautiful thing, especially for warrior blobs, that really kind of gives you that survivability, right? So I believe that it's after essentially every attack made against you. You get to roll dice for every model lost?
Every wound lost.
All right.
So, for example, let's say you have a unit of Lich Guard, right? They're 2 wounds each. You lost 4 guys, so you roll 8 dice, right?
Okay.
And then for every 5 and up that you roll, you get, and it meets the wounds characteristic of the model,
Okay.
you get a guy back.
Okay.
So obviously, if you think...
Go ahead.
Yep.
No, go ahead.
No, basically, if you really think about it, the thing that it really benefits is 1 wound models. Because every Necron Warrior you kill, it's essentially a better 5-up Feel No Pain. Right? But for something like a Scarab, you're almost never getting back a model unless you kill, like, a bunch of them, right? Because how often do you roll... Like, to get a whole base of Scarabs back, which have 4 wounds.
Right.
On average, it's about, like, you'd have to roll 12 dice, so 3 models would have to die. Right.
Which
it's not very likely.
No, possible, but not likely. Every now and then
Exactly.
you'll roll those clutch 5-ups, and then the one that died will come back. Every now and then.
Yeah, it happens, right? Like every once in a while, but you can't count on it.
No. And I believe that you actually have ways to double up on this, right? So there's ways to get extra reanimations. Do I have that right?
So there are ways to get extra reanimations, and there are ways to get extra pluses to your reanimation protocol.
Okay.
The pluses to reanimation protocol are things like canoptic reanimators, which just give a unit +1 to their reanimation. And yeah, and same with the Orb of Eternity, which is a relic, which is a specific relic resurrection orb. The resurrection orb, during your command phase, you pick a unit within 6 inches, and they immediately do a reanimation protocol for the whole unit, like everything you already lost. Which is, I use it in every game. I don't think if you're running a Necron Warrior blob, you would not take it. But the Orb of Eternity specifically gives you an additional +1 to reanimation protocols. So for Warriors, let's say you kill 19, you roll 19 dice on 4s, rerolling 1s. So you're getting back a lot of Necron Warriors that way.
That's much more than what on average it's I don't know, 12 roughly? 12?
Just about
11?
Yeah.
Maybe something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep,
I mean that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
as far as a durability aspect goes, you're not finding a lot better durability in a troops unit outside of warriors.
Yeah, and it's one of the reasons why you'll see warrior blobs is essentially because like having that level of stability with your reanimation protocols and being able to just bring back most of a unit when they die
Yep.
is so powerful. It's so I don't want to say it's a game winning scenario, but I want to say that it's certainly like one of those abilities that no other army has.
Right.
And it's so good. And this is kind of Reanimation Protocol is also kind of one of the problems of the Codex. Because if you look at something like the Destroyer, right?
Yep.
The Destroyer, let's say the Scorpec. No, I'm sorry. What's the new name for the gun platform destroyers? I always forget them. I used to just call them destroyers and heavy destroyers.
The Hex Mark Destroyer?
That's a character.
The Scorpec Destroyers.
The Scorpec Destroyers are the new ones. Locust.
Okay.
The new Locust Destroyer.
So many destroyers.
A lot of destroyers. So the Locust Destroyers are what used to be called Destroyers, which just had a big gun on them.
Right.
Used to be taken everywhere in 8th edition. And Reanimation Protocols used to be different. They used to be We'll Be Back. So you could actually kind of get it was more consistent that you could bring back some models with We'll Be Back. But now with Reanimation Protocol...
The multiple wound models, right?
Exactly. They have 3 wounds.
Okay.
And so, like we were talking about before, you're trying to get back models on a 5-up.
Yep.
With at least 3 dice. So, if 3 die, then you might get 1 back.
Right.
It's statistically likely that you will, but you might. And sometimes you don't.
So bigger blobs are generally better when running Necron armies. Is that what I'm hearing, or...
Yes, but the problem with destroyers is that they're expensive. They're 55 points a model.
Yeah.
So I think they're a little overcosted in that regard because they just have a 3-up armor, no invuln. They're a good gun platform, but they're only D3 damage, which in the current game isn't that great.
D3,
right? You want
D3 is one of those numbers where like it sounds good, but then you start rolling it and you're like, man, I've rolled a lot of 1s, and the way these are adding up just isn't as good as I want it to be.
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem, is that a lot of... This is one of the problems with the Codex that you'll run into if you start looking at it real close, is that a lot of the guns and a lot of the weapons are holdovers from 8th edition, where it was kind of okay to have a D6 damage gun and a D6 shotgun and things like that. I can't think of many guns in this list that have more than D6 damage. The exception is the new Doom Scythe, which has D3 plus 3.
Which is where they're kind of taking D6 damage weapons, right? A lot of the D6 damage weapons are moving to like D3 plus 3 or D6 plus 2 or something along those lines, to really kind of mitigate the 1 rolled, which it's always a 1.
Yeah.
It is. It's always a 1.
It's not great.
So dynastic codes are like those are like the different factions of Space Marines, right? Is that what the different obsessions for Drukhari, or
yeah, think of dynasties as chapters.
Right. That's what I couldn't come up with that word.
Yeah, so dynasties are the bread and butter of any Necron army.
Okay.
It's really what you want to build your list around, right? If you're doing a Necron Warrior blob, almost the best one possible is Novak for Warriors. Just because, and I've played games against this at majors and GTs, and I go up against the mirror match where somebody brings, their Mephrit,
Yep.
for example, or they're OBSEC, and you just look at them and you're like, okay, well, your guys have OBSEC, your guys have double OBSEC, my guys have regular OBSEC, but if I get into combat with you, like I charge or you charge, I get 2 attacks on in combat with a CP.
Yep.
If it's Protocol of the Hungry Void, I'm strength 5, so I wound you on 3s.
Right.
And my attacks have an AP, yours don't.
So you tend to be able to remove the Mirror Warriors over their ability to just sit there longer.
Yeah, because their more AP doesn't matter in that matchup because we both have a 5-up invuln save from one of the Chronomancers, right? So more AP on your guns in the Mephrit matchup doesn't matter, and more OBSEC doesn't matter as much. It matters sometimes, but in the long term, I'm going to kill you faster.
So in competitive lists, which dynastic codes are you seeing ran?
I mean, the big ones that I always see are it's called you can do custom dynasties, and the one I see the most are a combination of what's called Relentlessly Expansionist and Eternal Conquerors, which allows you to have a 6-inch pre-game move with all your models.
That's big.
That aren't, and it gives you all units OBSEC, and if you already have OBSEC, you're double OBSEC.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
It seems like the obvious choice because you just get especially in this game where you're trying to outperform the other people on objectives, right? It's just like, oh, everything in my army has OBSEC. That seems like the obvious choice, and I have a lot of surprisingly fast stuff. Usually, I'll see this with Scarabs, Wraiths, the mirror match with 60 Necron Warriors because they'll just have double OBSEC.
Yep.
But I think that just your warriors having OBSEC is enough.
Okay.
And just being able to dish out more pain in combat when they charge you is just so important.
I've found, at least in my games, that OBSEC really only comes into play on 1 or 2 objectives at a time. There's always 1 or 2 objectives that you really aren't competing for on your side, and then there's generally 1 or 2 objectives on your opponent's side that you're not really competing for, right? So it doesn't matter who's standing on that one, just that there's somebody there.
Right. And that's kind of the thing that the Drukhari meta is kind of... Drukhari are the big army right now, but in that matchup against Drukhari, the thing I found is that people who play the OBSEC one just get obliterated because the Drukhari are going to charge you, and then what?
Yep.
You're stuck in combat with them.
Forever.
Or but if you're Novak, then all of a sudden, I'm not stuck in here with you. You're stuck in here with me. Yep. And all of a sudden, it's like, can those Necron Warriors do anything? Well, they're strength 5 when you charge them. I can make them strength 6 so they're wounding on 2s for 1 CP. I can give them 2 attacks for another CP. So all of a sudden, you have anywhere between 10 and 20 10 to 40 attacks going into you, depending on how you deployed.
Yep.
Probably hitting on 2s, probably wounding on 2s. If you don't kill that unit, especially when they reanimate, what you're doing is you're essentially getting into a death trap, right?
It's a swamp. It's a swamp you're never going to get out of.
Exactly. Yeah, and during I think you recorded it on Wet, Wild, and Warpy, but it was the 3rd round of day 1 for the GT, where I had the Drukhari matchup. And, basically he's just sending guys in, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. My Necron Warriors are also kind of good in combat too, so it's a problem.
And with the nice part about the reanimation is the 2 damage. Okay, you dealt 2 damage to my warrior. He's gone now. Oh, look, now he's back.
Mm-hmm.
And the extra damage didn't affect me.
Yeah, and that's really when reanimation protocols shine because it's better than a feel no pain when you don't care about how much damage they're doing. It's just okay. You killed one guy. I have to reanimate that one wound.
Yep. So, I believe that with the Necron Codex, when it came out, you guys got some special secondary options. That right?
Do you mean the protocols?
So when you're choosing secondaries in your competitive games.
Oh, yes, secondaries. Yes, yes,
Right.
yes. Of course.
So
Yeah, we got some good ones.
yeah, so you got Code of Combat, which
Mm-hmm.
says score 3 victory points at the end of the battle for each enemy unit that has been destroyed by a Necron's noble unit from your army.
Yeah, and if you have the Silent King, which if you're running the Necron Warrior blob, you're probably going to have him,
Mhm.
because he just does so much for them. Um, you can take Code of Combat some games, um, but it also competes with Thin Their Ranks. It's the No Mercy, No Respite
Right.
column, and against the Drakari matchup, it's unclear whether your Silent King is going to survive till turn 3 or 4. So instead of Code of Combat, you probably want to take Thin Their Ranks against like Drakari, for example. But
Right. Or grind
if
them
you
down, I
think
guess.
or grind them down. Grind them down is also a good one that you could take with Necrons, depending on matchup.
Yeah.
But if there's like, I think if there was one Space Marine matchup that I lost that if I had taken Code of Combat, I took Code of Combat, and I think it would have done me well. But no, I took um, Grind Them Down, and I think if I took Code of Combat, that would have been much better.
Right. Because it doesn't require you to kill more things. It just requires
It
you to
just
kill
requires
things.
one unit.
Yeah.
Yeah, one unit, 3 victory points. And if you have a bunch of units on the table and they can't kill the Silent King, then you're like, yeah, I'm just gonna take Code of Combat, right?
So,
Because
other than the Silent King, what is classified as a Necron noble?
so it's very specific. It's not like what was it called? Space Marines, where everything's core or a character, right?
Yep.
A noble is specifically either an overlord, a lord, one of the other lords like Scorpec lords, and the royal warden is also one of the nobles, right?
Okay.
So a lot of these things, you look at them and you're like, well, I'm not taking. No, absolutely not. Why would I take, catacomb command barges are also nobles.
Okay.
And for that one, they have range attack, it's okay. And they have they're okay in melee if you take the one of the relics. You can build a list around Code of Combat and
Right.
do it with the Catacomb Command Barges,
Okay.
just because they actually have shots, they have attacks they can do in combat. But it's a lot better if you take the Silent King. I think Code of Combat was just made for the Silent King.
Right. Do any of the other ones scream out to you as real good options for your secondaries?
So it depends. It depends what army you're taking.
Okay.
Now, this is to be seen because I believe in a week we get a new chapter approved in Munitorium Field Manual
Yeah.
where they update all the secondaries, all the primaries, all the objectives. But against some armies, there's one called Purge the Vermin, which is essentially reverse recon, where you keep units out of table quarters.
Okay.
And it's also scored at the end of your turn. And if you don't have things that are super mobile, but you think that if they come into your zone,
Right.
that you can kill them, I think that's not a bad one.
Okay.
The other one, Treasures of the Aeons, like, don't even no. Don't even bother with it. It's not even worth considering right now.
Right.
I will say that's right now. Chapter Proof might change everything.
Yep. So,
and then Shadow Operation is interesting.
The Ancient Machineries one?
Ancient Machineries one, yeah. So Ancient Machineries is you score Ancient Machineries at the beginning of your command phase,
Okay.
and you started during your movement phase. Basically, a Necron core or a Necron Canoptic unit does an action on an objective that's not in your deployment zone.
Okay.
And there are one or two. Let me see if I can get the right wording here. There are one or two missions where this is not a bad idea because now I will say you and your opponent go and pick off, starting with your opponent, which objectives not in your deployment zone you pick, right? So let's say there are 4 objectives in the middle. Your opponent picks one, then you pick one, then your opponent picks one. So most likely 2 of them are just going to be on the other side of the table.
Right.
But if the terrain is correct, you can have one that's, you can control in your deployment zone. Maybe they're out of line. You have a Scarab unit out of line of sight.
Yep.
And, you could just get 12 points off of that.
Yeah. And 12 points is solid.
Yeah. I mean, of course, it depends. Like, I would never take it against Drukhari, even if I designed a list around it.
Well, that makes me feel good.
Yeah.
That makes me happy.
Well, here's the thing. You're going to advance and charge on turn 2, right? So, you don't know whether you go first or second. So, I could start scoring it at the end of my turn 1, and then you just, on your turn 2, you just take me off the objective. There's no, like, what am I going to do about it, right?
Probably not a lot.
Exactly.
Probably not a lot.
Yeah, it's not worth it in that situation. But otherwise, like, if they have a slow army, like Death Guard, that's not a bad one. Like, if they're playing the slow version of AdMech, that might not be a bad one either. But they probably can just kill you off the objective anyway, so...
So let's talk data sheets. Let's talk models. Let's talk HQs specifically. What HQs currently do you see as auto adds to a list right now, or are there any?
There's one. Okay, so there are a couple. I mean, the Silent King is the big model. He's gorgeous, but for the current builds, if you're taking a Necron spam list, he does so much for them. He makes them reroll wounds in combat, which almost no one does. Full reroll of wounds in combat. He does a full reroll hits and shooting. If he gets into combat, all models in engagement range fight last. This really does things to certain armies. Like, for example, the Dark Angels. There's a Dark Angels build where you take a bunch of Terminators, and they're banking on the fact that you are you're only wounding on 4s, and you're minus I believe it's -1 damage, if I'm not mistaken. You can correct me on that if you want.
Say it again. Sorry, I was reading a data sheet.
Oh, no worries. So Dark Angels have Terminators, which are, you always win them on 4s, and I think it's like -1 damage.
Something like that.
Yeah. Necrons don't care, because if you take Lich Guard and Warriors, you're 1 damage, and you reroll failed wounds. And you have an AP. Right. So you're probably going to do a ton of damage to them, especially with the Lich Guard.
Right.
So, yeah, like a unit of Lich Guard with the Silent King within range gets 50 attacks in Novak. Strength doesn't matter because you're wounding on 4s.
Yep.
But it's like AP -4 on the charge. and you're wounding on 4s, re-rolling wounds, you're
Yeah,
probably
that's
gonna.
you're gonna put a hurting on somebody with numbers like that. It's just
Yeah.
doesn't matter what their ability to avoid damage is. When you're putting -4 on somebody, that many attacks, you don't even need damage to. It's just that's enough.
Yeah, it's the reason why Vanguard veterans are so good, is because it doesn't matter that it's only 1 damage, or that it's only, like, I think it's only AP -2, maybe AP -3 on the charge. It's that you get to reroll your wounds,
Yeah,
and that's all that you need.
it's huge. Reroll anytime you get to reroll anything, and really anything. I mean, the reroll one die for Blackheart makes Blackheart uh, good. I mean, there are other things that
Yeah.
make Blackheart good, but to hit is always painful when you only have one die. To wound is
Hmm.
always painful when you're trying to roll 5-ups. It's so anytime you get to reroll, it's just always a blessing. Even if you're wounded on 2s, you throw those dice and you end up with 5-1s, and you're like, man, if I had to reroll this.
Yeah, and those moments you're like, oh, thank goodness I took a Lord for hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, right?
Yep.
Because I can re-roll those 8 dice that turned into 1s.
So there's definitely, I mean, I was just scrolling through the HQs on the Necrons, and it seems like you guys definitely are not shy on the number of HQs that you guys have. Just the sheer number of options. Um, are,
Yes.
are there
You have a
any
ton of options, but not all of them are great.
are there any that should just stay home?
Yeah. Um, okay. So I always believe that there's some use for everything. For example, the Plasmancer is probably the weakest Cryptek,
Okay.
but he's fun and very interesting in a mortal wound spam list, right? Because he's a character that does mortal wounds.
Right.
And so, like, you get 3 of them, you get 2 or 3 Catan, you get a bunch of Scarabs, you get the Psychomancer, who is another weird one, and we could talk about that later, but he has the Add of Indicator, which allows him to do mortal wounds very reliably. And all of a sudden, you're pumping out like 12 mortal wounds a turn, right?
It's almost like you have psychic powers.
Right, yeah, but they can't be denied, and it's
Right.
great.
Because that's one of the
Yeah,
things about Necrons, right? Is that you guys have no access to psychic powers.
right. And it's one of the downsides is, like, you have some ways to deny psychic powers, but like, all of a sudden some of the secondaries are just lost to you. You can't take, like, psychic ritual or something like
Right.
that.
Or mental interrogation, or
Hmm.
really any of those. And I'm hoping maybe we see a change coming up. Uh, with the chapter proof that's coming out. Maybe.
Maybe. I mean, if you want to talk about how Necrons fare after the packet comes out, I'm more than happy to come back on
Yeah, we'll have to
and just,
we'll have to see if we can't set something up. 'Cause
absolutely.
God knows there's always more to talk about, right? Um,
Oh my God, absolutely.
so I know we didn't hit on every HQ, but we do only have an hour. So
That's
why don't we hop on down to our troop choices real quick? Which, personally, I feel like every time I go up against Necrons, these are the bread and butter of the Necron list at the moment. In 8th, it felt like you were saying, the Destroyers were kind of like the keys to success
Mhm.
in 8th, and in this edition, it really feels like the Warriors are the key to success for this edition. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. I mean, they're just. I mean, in a book of kind of middling options, you have the Necron Warriors, who, on paper, if you just look at it, it's a Strength 4, Toughness 4, 1 wound model, and the gun is pretty good, but it's range 12. And then you realize that, you give it a bunch of buffs, you take it with the Silent King, you give it a 5-up invuln from the Chronomancer, which, solid HQ. Chronomancer, I will say, is the most solid HQ. That's not the Silent King, hands down. But yeah, like all of a sudden, and this is the biggest thing. They are the only unit that can re-roll ones for reanimation protocols, which makes them immediately better than Immortals. Because all of a sudden, it's not just that you're reanimating on a 5 or a 4, but you're reanimating on a 5 rerolling 1, a
Yep.
4 rerolling 1 for 1 wound models. And then it's like, okay, well, they're going to be back.
Yeah. They're sticking around.
Yeah. I have a feeling that they're probably going to get like a point increase.
With the with the new points changes that are coming out in a week or two.
I would assume so, just because GW likes to overreact just a little bit.
Yeah, well, I won't even tell you what I've been hearing about Drakari, because it all sounds false at the moment. All of it. Someone posted up a 60+ increase on Raiders, and I was like, come on, there's no way that's accurate.
No, I would say a good 20 to 40 point increase would be fair.
Well,
like making them 100 or 120 points.
We can agree to disagree. So what about Immortals? What's going on in the world of the Immortals? What makes them good? What makes them bad? What makes them ugly?
Honestly, so the thing that makes them good is that they're now back to T5, which is a good improvement over 9th edition. And in addition to that, they're back. They still have a 3-up invuln save or 3-up armor save.
Yep.
Their Gauss Blaster is pretty good, but Tesla as a whole got worse because it used to be that one of the big tricks of 8th edition is that you got a bunch of pluses to hit, and Tesla Carbines had a rule where every 6+ is 2 additional hits. So this Strength 5 AP0 weapon all of a sudden had like, okay, I shoot with 20 guys, 40 shots, I get 60 hits. Right?
Right.
That
was
the trick.
Right?
It wasn't unmodified. Now it's unmodified rolls of 6s, which still good, but you also pay extra for the Tesla, and that's not great.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, like you're probably only going to see like Immortals with Gauss, if anything. And even then, like, I think you're only taking them just to get a small unit of troops just to fill a slot.
Okay.
You're not going to take, like, it's a unit of 5 to 10. You're not going to take 10.
I like the 30-inch range on them. It seems like that's definitely something that's nice to have. But I don't know as though 10 of them over 20 warriors. And I know that's not their point equivalencies, but over 20, it's hard to talk you out of 20 warriors when the warriors they spam so good.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing, because you have so many warriors. The reanimation protocols allow you to daisy chain with them.
Yep.
When you reanimate them. So it's like, I was never on this objective. Oh wait, now it's my command phase. And all of a sudden, I use the Orb of Eternity. Now I'm on the objective, and I score 15 points.
Because that happens in command phase, right?
It happens in the command phase, which you also score, so you could do the Orb of Eternity before you score points.
Yep. Because I think you actually score at the end of the command phase. So anything that happens in the command phase still affects your scoring. It's the same thing with the Homunculus can reanimate racks with the Twisted Animator ability. Yeah. And so if you can get
same exact concept.
If you're just outside of that objective, you can pop 1 or 2 up, and now you got an OBSEC unit on there. So not a lot of options for troops, but no, I don't have a but. Just not a lot of options for troops.
Yep.
They're good though. The troops that they have are good.
Yeah, no, they're solid. I love them a lot. Oh, I will say in the chat, someone said that the Royal Wardens, Scorpic Lords, Locust Lords are not Lords, and that was my fault. My bad. I am getting the Xandrek madness on me. Yeah, so it makes that one secondary just a lot harder to score. Yeah. In general.
So I guess our next selection, our next grouping, right, is elites.
Yeah.
And
Now this is the interesting one right now
yeah,
because in eighth edition you would just who would take elites? Who cares about them, right? They don't do enough. Like um, I think half of the elites in this book were added during the release of ninth edition.
my eyeballs just exploded because I just looked at exactly how many. Like I knew you guys had a large number, but
Mm-hmm.
this is like half your codex is just elites.
Yeah. So let me tell you the ones that were added. It's like the Kryptos Thralls, the Hex Mark Destroyer, the Canoptic Reanimator, the Scorpec Destroyers, and the Canoptic Plasma Site are all and the Katanshar the Void Dragon are all elites that just got added in ninth edition. That's almost half of them.
That means they're
And
automatically
so
good, right?
depends. I don't know. So there is one standout, and this is probably the best stealth unit in the Necron Codex. It's the Kryptos Thralls.
The Kryptos Thralls. I've played Necron several times in ninth edition through
Mhm.
the GTs and the majors and the RTTs and yada yada yada. And
Mhm.
Kryptos Thralls are something I see in essentially every list I play against. Every single one of
Yeah.
them.
Well, think of it this way. It's a two-man unit that is 40 points. So you can put two of them into tactical reserves if you want to get um, deploy scramblers
Yep.
or to just get board presence, right? So those two units can go wherever they want. Or if your opponent has a lot of, if your opponent's goal is to like kill your um, characters with shooting, you keep one of them back, and their ability to protect friendly cryptax is amazing. Because you can put the cryptothralls out of line of sight of any units, and you put the cryptex in front, and they can't target those characters with shooting,
Right. So
and that makes it amazing.
they essentially have the lookout sir rule, except it's not the lookout sir rule. It's better than the lookout sir rule because it just straight up says if there's a cryptech unit within 3 inches of this, you can't shoot that.
Hmm.
Just straight up.
Yeah, so their best ability is to do things like deploy scramblers, like get objectives, right?
Yep.
Because they're infantry. The other thing is that they're actually deadly in combat. If they're near Cryptek, two models will get 12 attacks, hitting on threes, strength 5, AP minus 1, 1 damage. AP minus 2 if you're Nova. So they can do a lot of damage in combat, especially if there's like a unit that you need to kill, and it's like, what am I going to send? I'm going to send this 40-point unit to kill them.
Because
Sounds good.
it's a 40-point unit. What do I care?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, you're going to kill the 40-point unit? That's fine.
Right. Okay.
I think that's one of the best ones in the elites, and you have a lot.
Right.
I started using flayed ones simply because the ability to deep strike is really powerful. They have a stratagem for -1 to hit. They have they can get +1 attack, and they already have like 3 attacks each, so get them up to 4. Rerolling wounds like lightning claws for Space Marines. They're solid. Lich Guard are fantastic. They also have 3 wounds each, but they have like a 2-up, 4-up, which is so much better than what they used to be. And especially in this meta where like a lot of things have high armor and you want to get through them, like you can give the Lich Guard up to 5 attacks each. Phenomenal. Hex Mark Destroyer I've seen a couple people do, and I've played it myself. It's pretty good. And I think the thing that the Katanshar the Void Dragon. I think the Katans are they're very cool, but unless you're tailoring your list around them, I think they're just a little too expensive. They're 350 points for like a couple mortal wounds per model.
Yep.
They could be like 330, 300, and I don't think anyone would bat an eye.
I know I've seen
Right.
quite a number of people taking the Void Dragon, just for his durability, right? I mean, if you don't
He is
participate,
durable.
yeah, if you don't participate in multiple
Yeah.
phases, he's hard to kill.
Yeah, and he is durable. But I think why people are taking the Void Dragon is they have matchups against vehicles, something that they need to kill, and they're like, how do I kill it? Well, I kill it with the Void Dragon because he has. You look at his abilities and you're like, okay, well, when he's attacking vehicles, his damage characteristic goes from a D6, which is kind of,
Yeah, we
to a
talked about that
D3 plus
earlier.
3, which is yeah. So he's going to a D3 plus 3 damage characteristic, and then you're like, okay, great. Like, and then you think about it, and you're like, he's 350 points. That's a unit of 20 Necron Warriors, and then another 90 points of stuff.
That's a big sink. For
Yeah,
sure. For sure.
yeah. And so I look at these, and I'm like, if I'm playing a Mortal Wounds spam list, I'm gonna take 3 Catan, and call it a day. I love the Nightbringer. I think the points increase was fine. 20 points increase, sure, whatever. Um, the Transcendent Catan in a Mortal Wound spam list, I like that a lot. But I think overall they're just a little too expensive for what they do,
Well,
especially the Void Dragon and the Deceiver.
supposedly, if we all agree not to play something, it'll get cheaper, right, GW? Right? Right?
That's right. Yeah.
All right, so we are coming up on time here, because we do have more content coming today. But
Mm-hmm.
I do want to hit on one or two more things real fast, because I wouldn't want to leave without talking about them. What, other than the Resurrection Orb relic that we've talked about earlier, are there any real standout relics?
The only one, I mean, the only melee one is gonna be, um, it's called the, yeah, it's the, no, not the solar staff. I want to get the voltaic staff, and that if you have somebody with a staff of light and they're not taking the Orb of Eternity, give them the voltaic staff because it's just a solid, staff, and anyone can take it. Any dynasty, it's a good one. But the big one that you take first before anything else is a Veil of Darkness. It only affects core now, but if having that extra redeploy, getting out of combat, right? Even if you're not taking the warrior blobs, getting into that situation where you're just like, I'm gonna lift him up and put him back down again. It's not, you can't stop me from doing it.
Right.
It's not like I'm leaving combat. I'm not, removing. I'm not. What's the word I'm looking for?
You're not falling back.
I'm not falling back.
You're just
Thank you.
disappearing.
Right. And I've had somebody, talk to me about this. Is like, but they're leaving combat. I'm like, it doesn't. Your ability to make me not fall back from combat doesn't affect this.
It's the same thing
Right.
with the jump and what used to be Black Cornucopias for Rax, which they so graciously took away, and the fade away ability for Mandrakes, and I believe Custodes have an ability that does the exact same thing. I mean, there's a whole host of them throughout the game that really it says, okay, I'm here, but I'm no longer here.
Right, and that's really powerful. I think if you're gonna stick with and it gets you in the spirit of Necrons,
Right.
which is that if you're playing a game of Necrons, what I want to hit on is that you're gonna be thinking of a few things. You're not necessarily trying to kill your opponent, though that's great. You're trying to outlast them, and you're trying to out-strategize them, especially with Necrons. We don't have the most powerful things, but you really gotta make sure that your decisions on the board are, you gotta be tricky, you gotta be clever with Necrons. They're not an army where you just like sit on an objective and score 3 points every turn and get 15 on a secondary.
Yep.
That's not them. right? They're a very thinky army. They're a very, I'm not naming names. I don't know, whatever. But they're a very thinky army. They're an army that you're just gonna finesse your way into.
Right. Well, so are there any shout outs you want to do before we head out for today?
Um, no, thank you for having me. Like, I enjoyed everything about this. You
Yeah.
know, I
No,
love talking about Necrons.
yeah. It was a blast. It sucks that we really didn't get to hit on a couple more things, but unfortunately, that's how the cookie crumbles. Uh, because realistically,
Dude, I'm totally down for a part two.
we could have
Like,
done a
if you
3 hour.
want to do it,
This could have been a 3 or 4 hour video. Let's be honest. These books are so
absolutely.
thick. Don't forget to pick up your book if you're looking at playing Necrons. You can get it at Born to Game, which is a game store up in Dumfries. You can get it at your hobby place, which is down in Stafford. They're a great army. They play a lot. They're a lot of fun to play, is what I meant to say. And we'll catch you next time. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And